Have you ever, reached for a Band-Aid or maybe some baby powder and just stopped for a second to think about the huge company behind it? Johnson& and Johnson.
Right.
They're probably a name that touches your daily life in ways you don't even realize. But often the real story of these giants lies, well, way beneath the surface, beyond what we see in our medicine cabinets.
Hmm.
Looking at the recent 10K filing, what kind of surprised you the most about J&J's actual scope and how they operate today?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Most people do think of J&J with those, familiar consumer things.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating, especially now, is just how much more complex and, frankly, focused their world is after they spun off those consumer brands.
Right, Kenvue.
Exactly. And this 10K, it isn't just some dry corporate document. It's like a genuine window into their global operations, their financials, and the pretty significant, sometimes surprising challenges they're dealing with every day.
And that's exactly what we want to unpack today. Let's forget the simple household items for a minute, because in this deep dive, we're aiming to go beyond the familiar, to really try and understand the intricate world of this healthcare giant.
Sounds good.
Our mission, really, is to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the insights from this pretty dense document, and give you a shortcut to being properly informed about one of the world's biggest healthcare players.
Yeah, cut through the jargon.
Exactly. So let's start right at the beginning. Who is Johnson & Johnson today, really, at its core?
Well, they've got this incredibly long history, right? Incorporated way back in 1887 in New Jersey. Today, it's mostly a holding company. That means it owns a bunch of different operating companies all over the place.
Okay.
Doing business in practically every country. And their main focus now, especially after that Kenvue separation, is, broadly speaking, human health and well-being, but specifically through innovative medicines and medical tech.
And that global reach, well, it must need a massive workforce. The 10K mentions the scale, doesn't it? Something like 138,100 full-time equivalent employees worldwide as of the end of 2024.
Yeah, it's huge, a massive engine, like you said.
That's quite the engine powering global health.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And to manage all that, the 10K says J&J is basically organized into two main business segments now.
Right. Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
So the first one is innovative medicine.
Okay. Innovative medicine. That sounds like pharmaceuticals.
Pretty much. It's all about prescription-based products, stuff distributed to healthcare professionals. We're talking about, major therapeutic areas, immunology.
Like for rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Then infectious diseases, think HIV/AIDS, neuroscience, so mood disorders, schizophrenia, oncology, obviously cancer treatments, and also cardiovascular, metabolism, and pulmonary hypertension. Big areas.
And can you give us an example or two just to make it more concrete?
Sure. So in immunology, probably the best known is Stelara. It's a major treatment for inflammatory conditions. In neuroscience, they have this nasal spray called Spravato, which is for treatment-resistant depression. So these are really specialized medicines. They need a ton of ongoing R&D.
Okay, so that's the innovative medicine side, high-tech drugs. What about the other arm, the second segment?
That's medtech.
MedTech, so devices and technology.
Exactly. It covers a really broad range of medical devices, technologies used in areas like cardiovascular care, orthopedics.
Like hip and knee replacements?
Yeah, hips, knees, also surgery in general, and vision care. You'll find things like electrophysiology products for heart rhythm issues, those orthopedic devices, and even globally recognized brands like ACUVUE contact lenses.
ACUVUE. Okay, I know that one.
Yeah, most people do. And like the innovative medicine side, these are mostly used by professionals, doctors, surgeons, eye care specialists.
What really struck me in the 10K reading through it was their focus on people, human capital. They don't just talk about products. They actually state quite clearly that their employees are critical for success.
That's a really key point they make. Their whole strategy seems to be built around getting and keeping top talent. They talk about fostering a learning culture. They have this global learning day, a J&J Learn platform, and trying to build an inclusive, merit-based environment. It's all guided by their company values, which they call their credo.
Right. The credo is pretty famous.
It is. And interestingly, they reported a voluntary turnover rate in 2024 of just 6.3%.
Wow, 6.3% for a company that size.
Yeah, in this competitive field, that's actually quite low. It suggests their strategies for keeping people are, probably working pretty well. That stability is crucial when you're doing long-term R&D.
That makes sense. Okay, so we have a clearer picture of the structure, the two main pillars. Let's shift gears a bit and look at the money. How did all this translate into financial performance in 2024? How did J&J do?
Okay, financials. Overall, their worldwide sales went up 4.3%. That brought them to $88.8 billion.
Almost $89 billion. Pretty substantial.
Very substantial. But digging into how they got that increase is interesting. It was mainly driven by volume growth, selling more stuff, about 5.9% more volume.
Okay.
But get this, zero price growth. They didn't raise prices overall, and they actually had a negative hit of 1.6% just from currency fluctuations.
Wow. So selling significantly more units, but no pricing power and currency working against them. That really tells you something about the market, doesn't it? It's super competitive.
Extremely competitive.
Yeah.
It means they're relying heavily on just selling more to grow the top line, which, as you said, can be tricky.
How did that look geographically, U.S. versus international?
The U.S. was strong. Sales hit $50.3 billion, which was up 8.3%.
Okay.
International sales, though, were actually down slightly, 0.5%, landing at $38.5 billion. Part of that dip internationally was the expected decline in COVID-19 vaccine sales.
Ah, right. That makes sense. Okay, let's zoom in on those two segments then. Innovative medicine, how did that fare? Sales were $57 billion, up 4.0%. But you mentioned competition earlier.
Yeah, and you really see it here. For instance, sales of huge products like Stelara and Remicade, both in immunology, actually went down.
Down, why?
Biosimilars. Basically, competitors launched highly similar versions of these biologic drugs, often at lower prices. So like generics for complex medicines.
Got it. So that eats into their market share or forces prices down?
Exactly. But on the flip side, another drug, Triam-FYA, also in immunology, saw really impressive growth. That was partly because the overall market grew, but also because they gained market share with it. So it's this constant like push and pull within the portfolio.
Okay, a real balancing act. What about medtech? Sales there were $31.9 billion, up 4.8%. The report mentioned acquisitions helping there.
Yes, acquisitions were definitely a factor, especially bringing Shockwave Medical into the fold. That seemed to give them a boost, although it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some areas, like advanced surgery, actually saw declines. They mentioned things like China's volume-based procurement.
What's that exactly?
It's basically where the government negotiates really large purchase volumes to get much lower prices. That, plus other competitive pressures, hit some areas. But that was offset by growth in other parts, like wound closure, and, as we said, the impact from acquisitions like Shockwave.
Okay, this really changes how you think about J&J. It's not just Band-Aids, it's these massive, complex pharma and device businesses constantly adapting. Speaking of adapting and looking ahead, what about their investment in the future? R&D, acquisitions, any standout numbers there?
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Their R&D spend in 2024 was staggering, $17.2 billion.
$17 billion just on R&D.
Just on R&D. It shows a massive commitment to finding the next big thing. And it seems to be working, at least partially. They stated that new products, ones launched in just the last 5 years, made up about 25% of their total sales in 2024.
Wow, a quarter of sales from recent launches. That's significant.
It really is. And then, besides pouring money into internal R&D, they were very active with acquisitions in 2024.
Right.
You mentioned Shockwave Medical. That was $12.6 billion in net assets acquired.
Okay.
Then Ambrx Biopharma for $1.8 billion. Proteologics for $208 billion. And they even announced another big one after the fiscal year ended, Intercellular Therapies for $14.6 billion.
So a clear strategy, innovate internally and buy innovation externally.
Precisely. A dual approach to growth.
And talking about big strategic moves, we absolutely have to touch on the Kenvue spinoff again. That really reshaped the company. Can you just quickly recap what happened there?
Sure. So they formally separated the consumer health business, which is now Kenvue, back in 2023. Then fast forward to May 2024, J&J did this final step, a debt-for-equity exchange. Basically, they swapped their remaining Kenvue shares to reduce their own debt. The bottom line is, J&J no longer owns any Kenvue stock. They took a small loss on that final exchange, about $0.4 billion. But it means they are now fully focused just on innovative medicine and medtech, streamlined.
Makes sense. And what about rewarding shareholders? Dividends, they have quite a track record, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's quite remarkable. Johnson & Johnson increased its dividend for the 62nd consecutive year.
62 years straight?
62 years. They paid out $4.91 per share in 2024. That's a huge signal of financial stability and, commitment to returning value to shareholders.
Definitely. What about the other side of the balance sheet, debt?
Their total debt did go up. It reached $36.6 billion.
Yeah.
Part of that increase was clearly to help fund those big acquisitions we just talked about, like Shockwave. So they're definitely willing to use leverage for strategic growth opportunities.
Okay, so financially strong, investing heavily, but using debt to do it. Now, this is where things often get, well, really complicated for these global giants. The risks,
Mm.
the legal battles, competition is obviously huge, but what does the 10K say about that?
You're right, it's a minefield. They state very clearly they face intense competition across all their product lines, everywhere they operate.
Mm.
It's not just fighting for sales. The competition is particularly fierce in R&D, who finds the next breakthrough,
Right.
in protecting patents and in pricing. Competitors are always trying to develop similar tech or challenge their patents. It means J&J has to constantly innovate and defend its position.
And then there's the legal side, which for a company like J&J seems incredibly complex. The 10K goes into quite a bit of detail on some major legal challenges. Let's unpack the Talc situation first. That's gotten a lot of headlines.
Yeah, the Talc matters are a really significant ongoing issue. They're facing thousands of personal injury lawsuits. The claim is that their Talc products, mainly Johnson's baby powder, cause cancer.
And have they lost cases?
They've won some, had some defense verdicts, but there have also been some very large verdicts against them. There was that big Missouri verdict, eventually reduced to $2.1 billion.
Yeah.
And they mentioned paying out about $2.5 billion, including interest, back in 2021, related to some specific Talc claims.
And they're trying a different approach now, right? Something about bankruptcy.
Yes. In May 2024, they proposed what's called a prepackaged Chapter 11 bankruptcy plan. It's specifically designed just for these cosmetic Talc claims. The idea is to resolve them globally. They've estimated a reserve of about $11.6 billion as of the end of 2024 to cover this potential settlement.
$11.6 billion reserved just for Talc? Wow.
It's huge. And the report also mentions a related issue, a securities class action lawsuit about whether they disclosed alleged asbestos contamination in the Talc properly. So it's not just one battlefront.
It really highlights the long tail risk of legacy products, doesn't it? Billions potentially going to resolve past issues instead of future innovation.
Absolutely, it casts a long shadow. And it's not just Talc. There's the opioid litigation, too.
Right. How's that looking?
They reached a big agreement to settle claims brought by states and subdivisions. The total potential payout is up to $5.0 billion. They'd already paid about 70% of that by the end of 2024. So that seems to be moving towards resolution, at least for a large chunk of it.
But still $5 billion. And then there are other product liability cases mentioned, too.
Yeah, a whole list. Things related to pelvic mesh devices, physiomesh hernia mesh, the antipsychotic drug Risperdal.
Yeah.
All involve ongoing legal defense, settlements. It really feels like a constant stream of legal challenges they have to manage.
It sounds exhausting, frankly.
And then, tied into the innovative medicine side are the patent disputes. This is absolutely central to their business model.
How so?
Well, generic drug makers are constantly challenging the patents on J&J's key high-revenue drugs. The 10K mentions ongoing fights over drugs like Invega Sustenna, Invega Trinza, Simtuza, Erlata, Invokana.
So blockbuster drugs.
Exactly. These are complex legal battles, often with appeals and trials dragging on for years. And the outcome of these cases can dramatically impact future profits from those drugs.
So they're fighting legal battles over past products and present products simultaneously.
Pretty much. And on top of all the private lawsuits, the 10K also points to increasing government scrutiny, investigations, potential penalties from regulatory agencies all around the world. That adds another layer of legal and compliance complexity.
Okay, so beyond the courtroom dramas, what about broader operational risks? Running a global company like this must have inherent challenges.
Definitely. There's supply chain, for one.
Yeah.
It's incredibly complex. They mentioned having 64 manufacturing facilities worldwide.
64, wow.
So any disruption, whether it's from a regulator stepping in, a quality control issue, or even a natural disaster hitting a key site that can seriously impact their ability to get products out the door globally.
And the world itself seems pretty unstable these days. How does that affect them?
Significantly. Their international operations are exposed to all sorts of things. Financial instability, really high inflation places like Argentina, Turkey, Venezuela, Egypt, constant currency swings, which we saw hit their sales numbers. And then there's the bigger picture. Geopolitical tensions, war, tariffs, trade restrictions. It all adds risk and complexity to operating internationally. It's like playing global chess constantly.
And one more modern risk, cybersecurity.
Yes, that's in there too. A persistent threat for any big company. The risk of cyber attacks, data breaches. It's very real, especially as they, like everyone else, use more AI and connected systems.
Hmm.
They state they have measures to manage these risks, but an ongoing battle, an evolving threat landscape.
So, okay, stepping back from all the details, what's the big picture here? Our deep dive into this 10K seems to show a Johnson & Johnson that's, well, huge, obviously, but now much more focused on those two core areas, innovative medicine and medtech.
That's right, a company driven by massive R&D spending and strategic acquisitions. But at the same time, constantly navigating this incredibly complex web of fierce competition,
Yeah.
major legal headaches, growing regulatory oversight, and just plain volatile global economic conditions.
Exactly. Understanding all these different facets gives you, the listener, a much more complete, I think, and realistic picture of a company that has such a profound impact on global health.
hmm It really highlights that tricky balance they have to strike between pushing innovation forward, dealing with market pressures, and handling corporate responsibility, especially with those legal issues. It's what a healthcare giant has to juggle constantly to stay ahead.
Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for you to ponder. In this world that's so interconnected and seems increasingly litigious, how do companies like Johnson & Johnson keep innovating, keep growing, while facing down these really significant, diverse global and legal pressures? And maybe more importantly, what could that mean for the future of healthcare itself?